Hello, and thank you for joining me again for another art lesson. Today, what we're going to be going over is something known as a grid drawing technique. And what a grid drawing technique is, it is placing a grid, which is a bunch of squares of the same width and height, placing a grid over top of an image that you would like to draw, and then transferring this image using a grid over to a blank piece of paper with another grid on it that has exactly the same count of columns and exactly the same count of rows in the blocks. So what that means is you have an identical number of blocks on this paper, an identical number of blocks on this paper. So how does this work? Well, the grid drawing technique is actually very simple to understand, and you do not need to be an amazing artist to be able to utilize the grid drawing technique. In fact, I give several lessons to my students. All of my grades that I teach actually do grid drawings. And with grid drawings, you can produce really good proportions, such as many of you may know, portraits are very difficult to do. This is an example of one of my students' works using the grid drawing technique. In fact, I have several up here that I'm going to show you. All of these were created by regular students. And when I say students, I do not mean high school students or college students. What I mean are middle school students. Some of them range from 6th grade all the way up to 8th grade. But needless to say, all of these were completed by students. They just simply used a grid technique, transferred to a new piece of paper with a new grid, and then when they were done, they erased the grid, with the exception of a couple. And this one that has exactly the same kind of grid that I have. So yes, using the grid technique, you can get proper proportions and you can actually create really spot-on artwork. So how does this work? The idea behind a grid drawing is you focus one block at a time and that's it. Nothing else, just one block at a time. So we look up here at this block. What's in this block? Do you see any lines? Do you see any values? Do you see any shapes? Well, actually, in this block and the next block down, there are no values in it whatsoever. So I can go over here to the corresponding block on my blank piece of paper. And what I do here is I create exactly the same lines and shapes and values that I see in the corresponding block on the artwork I'm trying to recreate. But since these two blocks are empty, I'm going to skip over them. The next block down that I look at is this block right here. And I can see that there is a defined line right here and another one there. I have 4 lines. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to transfer the lines exactly the way I see them here over to the corresponding block on the empty page. So I see a line that comes down like that, and it comes back up, and then I see another line that circles down like that, and then makes a little V. Now, if you are looking at this and you think, how am I going to draw this hair, or how am I going to draw that eye, or how am I going to draw the hilt of this sword, you are overthinking it. Way overthinking it. Remember, you are breaking this down into a block. That is it. The only block you are focused on is the block that you are working on. That is it. Everything else outside of it is irrelevant. It doesn't exist. Don't worry about it. You will tackle this when you get to that block. And just so you know, I'm using a pen. Yes, I would highly recommend for everyone watching this to use a pencil. And if you're doing line art like this, then it would be fine to use a mechanical pencil. If you are doing artwork that has some values and shading, I would recommend a wooden pencil. Because my camera does not like to pick up pencil very well, I am using a pen. It's a lot easier to pick up on there. So I have this block completely finished. So what do I do next? Next, I move on down to the next block. And I see that this line right here comes out to a peak like that. And then this curves down into almost a peak right here. And then it curves back up and kind of ends right about there. And then I have another line that comes down and ends right there. And that's it. That block and that block are done. I don't have to worry about it. So now I move down to the next block. In the next block, I just see there's a little line right there. And this comes down and fades out right about there. Do you see how simple this technique is? You just go block by block until you fill in all the blocks in this column. Then you go over to the next one and work your way back up. And it doesn't matter if you go in a square around, work your way in, or if you decide to start right here at the face, at the eye, and then just start working around like that. It doesn't matter. Pick a spot where you want to start and go for it. Now, something that a lot of my students find helpful is to number their blocks. You can see that this grid over here is numbered 1 through 9 and A through L. A lot of my students do that simply because it helps them not get so confused whenever you have a lot of blocks that you look at, because after a while, and I will admit you will do this, your eyes get a little crossed and you might confuse one block with another block, and then before long you are a block off. So I do recommend that my students do this. Now, is it necessary? No. Personally, I don't do this. I don't ever grid it like this and put my numbers and letters off to the side, but it is helpful, and I can understand why a lot of people find it helpful. So this right here is the grid technique. That's all it is. Very simple, straightforward. What you will find in the description, you will find a worksheet like this that you can download. It's an Excel document. With that document, you can also put images behind it just by transferring it over to Word, or you can draw your own grid behind it. You will also find Word documents with smaller grids on it. Now, this is a grid that I give to my younger students, while this is a grid I give to my middle-aged students. And for my more advanced students, such as my 8th graders and things like that, I actually give blank artworks to, like this right here. And what that is, I give them a picture that's printed off the internet of a famous person. They draw a grid on it. They then transfer that image over to a blank piece of paper, and they lightly draw a grid on there. So even if you don't have access to the files below, or let's say that you want to do a grid drawing of something else, it's very easy to do. All you need is a ruler, you need a pencil, and you just need some time. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I would like to thank you again for inviting me back for another art lesson. I hope that you have benefited from this, and I hope that you produce a lot of great grid drawings. Thank you very much. If you'd like to leave a comment with a link to one of your grid drawings that you did, go ahead, post that below. And until next time, have a great, wonderful day. Thank you very much.